This is CBC Here and Now.
Some winter storm conditions expected for northern portions of Labrador, and it looks like a gray and unsettled weekend for the island.
For the second time in 12 months, the breakwater here behind me in CBS has taken a beating.
Crashing over this here was pretty dramatic, frightening, to be very honest with you.
I'm Jeremy and I'll have that story coming up on Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Peter Cowan.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes. We begin tonight with the latest on COVID-19 in this province. 4 new cases were announced today, bringing the total number of active cases to 13. Dozens of people in the province are isolating as a result. Here and Now's Mark Quinn has been following along with today's update. So Mark, what did Dr. Fitzgerald say today?
Right, and as you say, there are 4 new cases in Newfoundland and Labrador today. 2 of those cases are in the central region and 2 of those cases are in the eastern region. And I'll start with those cases in the eastern region. One of them is a woman, perhaps a girl. They're both under the age of 20. One is a person who is under the age of 20. It's travel related. The second case is actually related to that cluster that we learned about yesterday. So there's now a 5th member of that cluster. And we also found out that the initial point of concern here is that we don't know, public officials don't know what the exact source of that initial infection is that began that cluster. So that's a real concern right now.
In total, we now have 5 cases associated with the cluster announced yesterday. Eastern Health is still in the process of investigating the initial source. Eastern Health is also contacting anyone that is a close contact of these cases, and we now have approximately 160 individuals who have been contacted by public health and are in self-isolation.
So we got a real insight into what it's like to be near the center of one of these clusters here at CBC today. We spoke with the owner of Sam Design, and she talked about how they discovered that one of the people who works at the store is living with one of the people who was identified as positive. Susan Drover spoke with the morning show this morning, and when she spoke with us, that was before we knew of the 4 new cases that were announced today.
One of the 4 known cases was connected to our staff person, so it was that close. Actually, I guess living in the same home, so it was extremely. It was very close. It was as close as it was 1 step away from our doorstep. So that was obviously quite a panic.
And Drover said that once they learned this, she said they learned this about 48 hours ago. Once they learned it, they shut down the store, and everyone who worked in the store was immediately calling 811. They were tested, and they've been doing contact tracing. And she was told later on now that that store has been cleared to reopen.
Okay, Mark, so that's the eastern region. Let's move to central now. One of those new cases is a man in his 40s. It's travel related, but the other is connected to the Marine Atlantic ferry run between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. So Mark, what can you tell us about that?
Right, and just to back up, people will remember that the first case associated with Marine Atlantic was identified back on January 20th. That was also an employee of Marine Atlantic. And then the next day there was a second case, also an employee of Marine Atlantic, who both of those people work on the Blue Patties. Today's case is the 3rd case, also someone who works on the Blue Patties. And all 3 of these people were on the January 16th crossing of the Blue Patties. And here's some of what Dr. Fitzgerald said about that.
We have identified a new case associated with the Marine Atlantic vessel, and this is not unexpected. We have had discussions with public health officials in Nova Scotia and with Marine Atlantic. The investigation is ongoing, and we will update when we have more information to share. If you have traveled on the MV Blue Patties between December 29th and January 16th, we do still ask that you contact 811 for testing if you have not already done so.
And Mark, we're seeing an uptick in cases this week, and with the source of this cluster still unknown, what does that mean for all of us? Can we expect to see more restrictions?
The short answer is not yet, but Janice Fitzgerald did say that everyone's watching this very closely. The public health officials are watching this very closely, and if things do change, they may have to consider some more restrictive measures.
We may be lucky enough that things are contained fairly closely. So if that's the case, that's great. And we won't have to look at further lockdown measures. But if we start to see that there is spread of this beyond, this small cluster right now, if we start to see more cases in the community, if some of these contacts end up showing being positive, then we may have to consider some additional measures.
So it looks like it'll be another busy weekend for public health officials doing all that contact tracing and testing as well. And for maybe as many as 160 people who are possible contacts of the people who have tested positive, they're in self-isolation. So hopefully it'll be a quiet weekend for them and they can ride out these 14 days and everyone will be fine. Carolyn?
Thanks, Mark. That's Here Now's Mark Quinn reporting live. In other news tonight, an 81-year-old man has been killed in an ATV accident. RCMP say the machine flipped and pinned the man. He was found on the ice yesterday on Twillick Lake near Harbour Breton. Police believe the man rolled down an embankment and onto the frozen lake. They say he wasn't wearing a helmet. According to authorities, 20 people died last year as a result of ATV or snowmobile accidents. This is the first death of 2021.
Well, there's reaction tonight to a CBC Investigate story we brought you earlier this week. Paramedics took to the streets of St. John's to call for action after we revealed new details of big problems in the Metro ambulance system. Rob Antle has the details.
Sirens of support for Eastern Health paramedics as they march this afternoon, doing the walk but not allowed to do the talk. Not permitted to speak according to their union. So they let their signs do the talking for them, to send messages calling for change.
As of today, they cannot speak publicly about their concerns. I can and I will.
NAPE President Jerry Earle is going public after new revelations about an old problem. CBC broke the story earlier this week, disclosing a blunt warning from Eastern Health Management to the province. A briefing, though, calling the Metro ambulance service dangerously understaffed. More than 2,000 times over 12 months, there's been no ambulance available to respond to a call.
That is not acceptable, and it cannot go on for 7 days longer, let alone 7 years longer.
Eastern Health has declined comment, and the health department says it can't talk during the election.
We are not going to go away. You have seen what we have been able to do in the past. And I call upon the politicians that are now seeking office to tell us what you're going to do to address the situation here in the metro area and across this province.
Calls from the union to ensure these frontline workers will be there when you need them most. Rob Antle, CBC News, St. John's.
The Gander Chamber of Commerce says 1 in 5 people in that community work in the aviation industry. And over the course of the pandemic, 300 jobs have been lost. Last week, Air Canada suspended all passenger operations at Gander International Airport. PAL is still running daily intra-provincial flights. The Chamber of Commerce says 300 jobs represents $25 million in wages. That reaches into other industries and the surrounding area, according to the business group. It wants the federal government to give the sector more support to help restore canceled flights and the local economy.
Well, taking a look at the satellite and radar, we do have an area of low pressure that we've been talking about for the last couple of days. That is moving towards coastal Labrador as we head through the overnight tonight and in through the day tomorrow. So that is prompting some winter storm warnings right now for Postville to Makovic and then Hopedale under a blowing snow advisory, and that will be mainly for tomorrow. And then watching another area of low pressure. This is going to pass south, but it is going to bring some waves with it. We've been talking about these high swells for most of the week this week, and that will continue. Now combine those waves, you can see them move in on Saturday. Combine that with high tide Saturday morning. Anywhere in those north-northeast facing coasts are going to see the worst of that. So the town of Conception Bay South has a stern warning for you. Stay away from the coastline. Some large waves this week have already flattened the breakwater near the yacht club, like I mentioned. So Here and Now's Jeremy Eaton has that story.
You can see these big channels in through. It started kind of like that, and then it just continued on down here, and the water was crashing over this here. It was pretty dramatic, frightening, to be very honest with you.
Conception Bay South Mayor Terry French isn't mincing words. Stay away from the water.
Let our people, our residents know and our non-residents that it's really not safe to be next to the ocean in the next few days, and whatever precautions you have to take, please take them and please stay away because it's going to be dangerous.
This aerial shot shows the waves crashing through. A quick look at Environment Canada's marine weather forecast spells it out. A sea of red warnings surrounding the eastern and southern parts of the island. Gale force winds and high swells will meet high tide, which has prompted the town of Logie Bay, Middle Cove, Outer Cove to warn people to watch waves from a safe distance. It's the second time that this has happened in the last year. During Snowmageddon, the same thing, severe damage. The town applied for and then got federal funding for a fix, but that check hasn't arrived yet. Now, they just have to wait for the weather to calm down. Adding up both events will be expensive. Some French guesses could be in the tens of millions of dollars.
Now we're going to have to do something obviously bigger than better than it's been here for decades like this.
French says it's forecasted to calm down later tomorrow, but he wants people to remain vigilant. A consultant has been hired to come up with a quick fix for now, and staff will be monitoring the coastline 24 hours a day.
Ensuring that people secure whatever they can secure, but Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate, and we hope that we're all totally wrong in this weather forecast.
Mayor French says that residents should steer clear of this area and keep an eye on the town's social media accounts to get the latest updates. And as he repeatedly said during the interview, the town is preparing for the worst. Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, Conception Bay South.
Well, now to the campaign trail. Liberal leader Andrew Furey says his approach to negotiations is the only way this province will get the results it needs. Yesterday, the PCs said we should push Ottawa to listen and put bankruptcy on the table if the federal government doesn't help the offshore. But as Here and Now's Garrett Barry reports, Furey says that strategy is the wrong one.
It's a word that will stop you in your tracks. Bankrupt.
Us going defunct, us failing as a province, will cause damage throughout the country.
The PC leader acknowledged the B word yesterday, but the head of the Liberals isn't going anywhere near it.
We have tremendous potential here, so I don't see us as being bankrupt.
Furey says you don't have to up the ante to get heard in Ottawa.
We're a small player in Confederation. Does
No,
Ottawa?
we're not.
We're not.
Every player in Confederation has an equal seat at that table. I'm on the phone with the Prime Minister. Everyone has a voice.
But make no mistake, he says his strategy isn't about rolling over.
You said some time ago that there's an $800 million fiscal gap. One proposal to fix that is to ask for a better deal from Ottawa. If you're not doing that...
I never said I wasn't going to ask for a better deal for Ottawa. I said my approach for asking for a better deal from Ottawa is different than his. I believe in sitting down and working collaboratively, negotiating together.
We will build a healthier and cleaner future.
And he says he's already got results.
$320 million for oil and gas. No obligation for the federal government to do that whatsoever. That's what happens when you have a good working relationships. $840 million towards Muskrat Falls. They had no obligation to do that.
The PCs called that scraps from the table. Furey disagrees.
That's what we can do together in a collaborative approach as opposed to tearing down flags and suing our family.
Has Canada treated us fairly?
They have treated us fairly. I mean, there's always a back and forth, and that's a healthy relationship in any federation.
But on some issues, these parties aren't so far apart. Both say this province is on the brink, facing big financial troubles. And both now say spending cuts can't be the only fix. Garrett Barry, CBC News, Clarenville.
Well, we have a clarification on a story we brought you last night on Here and Now. Liberal leader Andrew Furey has committed to creating a fertility clinic in this province. His party says a clinic would give people access to in vitro fertilization, which isn't offered in Newfoundland and Labrador. Furey says IVF is an expensive process. Parents often have to leave the province for weeks at a time for the procedure. Furey's campaign office did not provide a timeline or financial plan for this promise, only saying it would happen in the future.
We will be working with stakeholders, including the obstetrician and gynecologist here, who firmly believe that a clinic here is possible. We'll work with them to establish it, but in the meantime, we recognize that that takes time. We're going to provide supports to families who are availing that on the mainland.
Well, PC leader Ches Crosby spent much of today touring around Twillingate, stopping to announce his plan for the fishery. He says joint management will be key. Crosby says his government would promote open and fair access to the fishery based on the principles of adjacency and historic use, including Indigenous access. He'd review regulations around unintended bycatch, oppose any unilateral federal action to remove or redistribute any provincial quotas, and promote aquaculture and the sealing industry.
We can achieve what others could not and put Newfoundland and Labrador in the driver's seat of the industry that's been keeping communities going for centuries. We are not doing this out of greed. We are doing it because it's an important tool in our toolkit to drive economic recovery and jobs in a province that desperately needs both.
Well, the NDP didn't hold an official campaign event today, instead sent out a statement reaffirming the party's commitment to keeping the province's tuition freeze for post-secondary students. It also committed to a low-income grant program, closely mirroring a campaign promise unveiled in the 2019 election. The party says its education plan would recruit and retain young people. Today's pledge suggested using federal stimulus funds to tackle ongoing repairs at Memorial University's aging St. John's campus.
So that's what the parties announced today, but when it comes to the major platforms, where are they? Just over 2 weeks from voting day and no red, blue, or orange book. No major party has presented a full set of costed promises. As Cease Hare reports, some say it's time to talk about it.
Typical in an election in this province, a costed platform usually known by the party color. Lynn Verge had her blue book back in the 90s. The Liberals always have their red book. They contain their entire platforms with specifics on promises to stimulate the economy and create jobs. The problem this current campaign? It's nearly half over, and voters have not yet seen those platforms.
Politicians would much prefer not to have those types of conversations in an election time, right?
Why is that, though, Richard?
It's you know, it goes back to the old school politics, right? It's easier to get elected, they believe, by not having those challenging conversations.
Alexander says the province's overspending problem is not only not being talked about, no credible solutions are being offered up.
The best thing a Newfoundland and Labrador government could do would to give investors certainty that, you know, we're not going to have a $1 billion tax increase, $2 billion tax increases, that we're serious about dealing with this fiscal situation. We'll get back to a position where we're able to borrow money without a cosign from our father, you know, the Liberal government at the federal level.
Also missing, he says, is an immigration plan to combat a shrinking population and a shrinking tax base. And those who help people who don't have enough food to eat also notice a dribs and drabs approach to party platforms.
I think that's often, the complaint that we have at election time, that all of us have, not just me personally, but I think it often feels like it's a little bit late in the game before we get to the meat of it, and that's a shame. We've seen bits and pieces. There's been a little bit of increased support promised, for example, for community gardens. But I think we'd be really interested to see some of the more systemic solutions.
For example, Smee says, fixing no food problems means a platform on job creation, minimum wage, social assistance income support, and guaranteed basic income. His group also works on stimulating food production, and he'd like to see something on that.
I'd be really interested to see what the parties would have to say about procurement, for example. So can we get our big institutions, our schools and our healthcare institutions to buy local more?
Smee would also like to see a discussion about regulatory barriers and red tape for those launching a food-based business. Cease Hare, CBC News, St. John's.
We're going to keep the conversation going on this topic. The panel of political veterans is going to weigh in, and they do not hold back on why we haven't seen much talk of the fiscal challenges this province is facing. That's coming up a little later on the show.
All right, now to other news. One of the province's most celebrated boat builders has passed away. Henry Vokey of Trinity died Wednesday. He was 91.
CBC spoke with Vokey many times over the years. He was even featured on Land and Sea in 2012, back when the master boat builder had a dream of building one last schooner, which he did.
Our Gavin Sims spoke with Vokey's daughter-in-law on CBC Radio's The Broadcast. Here's part of their conversation.
If a fisherman buys a wooden boat, 9 chances out of 10 he can repair his own boat.
He was a very progressive thinker, you know, again, given he was born in 1929 in a completely different world before Confederation, but he was a very progressive and modern man. And it was just amazing because he was so full of arthritis. His hands are all lumps and like a claw. We used to say he could slide a hammer in one hand and the other hand fit the plane. And even with his fingers like that, the fine detailed work that he could do, you know, but his mind was as sharp right to the end as it had ever been. His memory, absolutely everything. He knew everybody, and he told us some stories of years ago and, you know, different boats, or, you know, he could remember a particular knee that he caught in a particular spot in the woods for a particular boat. And that was all still with him.
Yeah, and it sounds like he was well loved himself.
Oh, he was. He, you know, in this area, everybody knew him. And another just amazing thing that I think is bringing a lot of us some comfort. Henry passed away yesterday, January 27th. It was exactly 11 years since his wife passed. So they share another anniversary, and that is truly comforting to the family. We feel like, okay, time for you to go on, Henry, now with Carrie, and be together in another way.
Here's a look at the current temperatures across the board into the minus single digits. Things a little slick out there as well, with some freezing drizzle earlier today. That's generally the stories we head through tonight, but I'll have the full weekend forecast coming up.
This weather forecast is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. Somewhere out there is a winter with your name on it. Find it now at stayhomeyear.ca.
Ashley, it was a bit drizzly out there this afternoon, but much cooler in the morning.
Yeah, it was very cold this morning. In fact, the coldest that we've seen so far this year. It's been relatively mild, but since last March, actually. The airport reported minus 9.8 this morning, and cold through Badger. Take a look at the temperature. Minus 19 was the overnight low last night, and temperatures into the minus 20s for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, as well as Lab City. This afternoon, temperatures rebounded quite nicely, though, hovering around minus 3 in St. John's, above 0 for Corner Brook today, and still in those minus single digits across coastal Labrador, minus 7 in Cartwright, minus 8 today in Makovic. Taking a look at the satellite and radar, we're not seeing too much activity as far as central Newfoundland goes, but we do have an area of low pressure to the south that is bringing some cloud cover. We still have that onshore flow, though, and that is leading to some flurries and or some freezing drizzle today, and that's being picked up on the radar as we speak. That's generally the story as we head through tonight, and we're going to see that pretty much anywhere where you're along the north or central. Where you're in that onshore flow, you can see the risk of some flurries and light snow as well as freezing drizzle overnight. Generally pretty nice along the south coast thanks to that onshore flow, or rather northerly flow. And then we're going to see flurry activity expected along the west coast as well. Then the snow will move in for coastal Labrador. It will intensify as we head through tomorrow, hence those winter storm warnings, and then continue through the day on Saturday. Here's where our overnight lows should sit tonight. Again, within the double digits, minus double digits for those areas in the low-lying regions, and then we're looking at temperatures in the minus single digits elsewhere. It's going to stay breezy tonight, northerlies anywhere from 30 to 50 kilometers per hour for eastern areas, and then northwesterlies along the west coast, somewhere between 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, and then flurries a story for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Lab City. You're going to sit around minus 24 tonight under generally cloudy skies. As we head through tomorrow, like I said, the snow will continue for most of coastal Labrador, and those winds are going to increase as well. So 60 to 80 kilometer per hour wind gusts along with that snow will lead to those winter storm conditions from Postville to Makovic, and then you're looking at blowing snow around the Hopedale and vicinity, with snow moving in through the day for the northern peninsula, and we're going to see that through central as well, eastern areas of the island, particularly the Avalon, Bonavista area. You're going to see either flurries or freezing drizzle through the day tomorrow as well, with snow, light snow or flurries moving in towards the evening hours. Here's where we should be sitting temperature-wise tomorrow, anywhere from minus 1 really to minus 4 across the board. The winds again out of the northwest. It will be anywhere from 40 to 60 kilometers per hour, and then less towards the west coast, but you're still looking at gusts between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. And then hovering around the 0 degree mark, even above 0 for Mary's Harbor tomorrow. And you're looking at winds, again, breezy, northwesterlies 40 to 60 in those areas. In the winter storm warning, you can see 60 to 80 kilometer per hour wind gusts. And as far as the amounts go, it's looking like anywhere from 15 to 20 centimeters is possible for Makovic. Otherwise, spread further north and further south, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15 centimeters. And that will fall through the day tomorrow through the first half of Sunday. Taking a look at Sunday's forecast. It's going to clear out quite nicely for most of Labrador with plenty of sunshine. The snow will taper to flurries and then eventually end. And then we're just looking at unsettled conditions for most of the island. Temperatures near or below 0 for most along the south coast. You could see some mixing with rain, particularly the Burin Peninsula, because your temperatures will be hovering around 2 degrees. As we head into Monday, plenty of sunshine again up across the big land, and then we're looking at some cloudy periods possible, but still unsettled conditions with the potential for some flurries, and it looks like it's going to stay generally gray for central and eastern areas as you see your temperatures hovering in and around the minus 3, minus 4 degree range. Here's a look at the future, or at least the next 5 days into Tuesday. Nice, -1 with sunshine, and then Wednesday we're going to see a change in the pattern. push in that jet stream, which is going to bring in some milder air. So at this point, it's looking like some snow to start Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, changing over to rain as our temperatures bump up well above zero. For central and western Newfoundland, you'll see your snow start again Tuesday night at some point or early Wednesday morning. We could see some ice with this, some freezing rain, and then change over to rain for central and as well as western Newfoundland. Again, looking at your temperatures up above zero. For eastern Labrador, plenty of sunshine through Tuesday. Then things get unsettled on Wednesday. -4 though, a bump up in those temperatures. And then same thing for Lab West, but you're looking at your temperatures staying into the -11 degree range. We've been showing you lots of photos, or at least talking about all of these beautiful waves. This is high surf at Cape Spear. Mo captured that shot there. If you have any weather photos to share with us, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Newfoundland and Labrador is running close to record deficits, but you haven't heard much about it on the campaign trail. The promises from all three parties are around expanding government programs, not cutting them. The closest we got to a discussion about finances was the PC's leader's pledge yesterday to threaten bankruptcy if Ottawa doesn't do more for the oil industry. So why is no one willing to talk about the fiscal reality? Well, hopefully our political veterans can shed some light on it. Jerry Rogers is a former NDP leader, Sandy Collins, a former PC cabinet minister, and Colin Holloway, a former Liberal MHA. So, Sandy, let's start with you. Why do you think it is that we're seeing Ches Crosby's willing to talk about bankruptcy when it's getting Ottawa to fix our problems? Why aren't we seeing any solutions about solving the problems ourselves?
I think it's what we see typically in elections where parties and leaders just want to talk about the good things that they plan to bring if elected. But, you know, we've talked about it so much, we've beaten it to death, talking about the fact that we're in unprecedented times, facing huge deficits, and the debt is just, it's enormous. And all we have heard, as you have said, we have the PC leader talking about playing the bankruptcy card with the feds. That's his plan. We have Andrew Furey talking about let's plan a come home year. And we have Alison Coffin of the NDP saying let's download further pressure on the private sector and raise the minimum wage. None of these has addressed any of the spending problems we have. And, you know, it was only a couple days before the election, it was all front and center, the fiscal challenges we've had. Since the election's been called and the writ has been dropped and we've started hearing from leaders and parties, we've heard nothing. And I think our spending problem is what people want to know. And that's why there's been so much attention given to Moya Green's report, because that's going to have some answers. Now, some of those answers are going to be very ugly, granted. And maybe the political will just isn't there to discuss them now, because I don't know if it's something Newfoundlanders need to know. I don't know how willing they're going to be to accept some of those ugly truths, but I think we need to start that discussion and need to start it today.
Colin, isn't there some opportunity here, though, for someone to differentiate themselves to say, you know what, I'm willing to start that conversation and willing to then get some respect for at least being willing to put that out there and lay it on the line?
Well, I'm not sure, really, because if you think back in 2016, and I mentioned this last time we spoke, you know, the current government, well, I guess under Dwight Ball, came in with a very austere budget and, you know, came in with a lot of new taxes. There was a deficit reduction levy that came in. There were all kinds of cuts that came as well. But immediately, the public pushed back. I remember being told in caucus that if we hit $22 billion as a total debt for this province, we would be bankrupt. We are somewhere around $17 billion now, I think is the estimate. We're not that far off. So bankruptcy is a real possibility. We have to take some really tough measures, but I don't think, given how the public has responded in the past, that there is any appetite by politicians. I can't say that there's no appetite by some people in the public, but certainly by politicians to relive what happened after 2016.
So, Jerry, is this the fault of the politicians for not talking about it, or is it the fault of the public for not being willing to at least entertain the discussion?
Well, I think, you know, saying that the public wants to know where government is going to cut and that spending has to be cut, let's really look at what's happening in private households. People are really suffering because of the pandemic, because of the economic downturn. Many households are in crisis. I believe we have to flip that and talk. We all know that the province has a huge debt, but I do not believe that it's from spending on services that the people need. This is the role of government. And what we need to look at is the growing unemployment. And what government's role is right now is to be talking about what are they going to do to make sure that our people are as healthy as they possibly can be, to make sure that our people are as educated as well as they possibly can be. We have to build up a good workforce. We have to make sure that our people are healthy, strong, and resilient. And if that's not what our focus is, and that's what the party should be talking about. And then when we look at some of the situations where money is being thrown around because it's an election year, the household renovation program, what a missed opportunity. That should have been a household renovation program to increase environmental sustainability, and energy efficiency. That's what that should have been directed towards. It's been a failure on many levels. You have households where they have $200,000 income into a household that were eligible to get money to build a deck. That doesn't strengthen our economy. It doesn't strengthen our people.
We've seen that all three party leaders have said, I want a mandate to govern in this province. If that election campaign that gives them a mandate doesn't have any talk of cuts, do they actually then have the mandate to make cuts when they're in power? Sandy, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, well, realistically, we know that if a government gets a mandate, particularly a majority mandate, they're going to make decisions that they want to see happen. That's why this is a particularly important time now to be talking about what their plan is. I want to know, if I vote for candidate A, what his leader and his party, or her leader, her party represents. I'd like to have those questions now, instead of seeing, as Colin had mentioned back in 2016 with that budget, and there were a tremendous amount of cuts, and what we saw was a reaction to that. So they went into an election saying, everything's good, things are going to be fine, there's not going to be any tax increases, and what was delivered was something very different. So, and what you see then is people pushing back, people protesting and mobilizing. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. If people feel as though they weren't told the truth, or they weren't told the full story, and then something very different is delivered. So I think it would be in everyone's best interest if they could be upfront. So at least everyone knows full well, if I elect candidate A and his party or her party, I know what's coming. And right now, we certainly don't have that assurance from any party.
I think, one of the things I'm hearing in some of the local stores and certainly around the water cooler is that most people realize that we have to make some cuts. We can't continue down this road. I hear young parents talking about that, my son or daughter is going to have to pick up and try to solve this long-term debt issue. So that's something different than, I don't know, with Jerry and Sandy. I mean, when we were running for office, we didn't necessarily hear those things at the door. I hear it now, and people are being more vocal about that these decisions have to be made. So I'd agree with Sandy that we do, and politicians, and trying to get a mandate for any government, any party right now, they're going to have to be very honest with the public and say, we have no other choice if we're going to be sustainable, and we can't go to the federal government. I think that is the wrong approach, to think that the federal government is going to bail us out every time that we go with our hand out, because we're a part of Canada, and that's part of terms of our confederation. I think we have to take care of our own household, and just like we would all do individually, we'd have to make some tough decisions with everybody in the household, all family members being part of that discussion. So no matter if it's the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives, I don't think there's a minority. I don't think there's a majority government that's going to form here on the 13th of February. I think it's another minority government. And so they're going to need all parties to support some very tough decisions going forward.
Well, we have 2 more weeks of the campaign. It'll be interesting to see what topics come up as we move forward. Thank you very much, all three of you, for sharing your insights with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, a political science professor and political commentator is weighing in on the bankruptcy bargaining chip comment. Kelly Bladuke was on the St. John's Morning Show today and gave the PC leader props for using the B word.
Give Ches Crosby a lot of credit for saying bankruptcy. I think the term bankruptcy needs to get used. I think we need to be talking about bankruptcy. This is a province that actually went to the Prime Minister and said we can't pay our bills a number of months ago, and that's going to happen again. I'd like to see all of the parties talking about bankruptcy. I'd like to see what the economic platforms really are for that. Where I wouldn't give Ches any credit is that he kind of did the same garbage that leaders keep doing in this province. He basically said, well, we're going to get Ottawa to do what we want. We're going to be in a position of power. And I'm sorry, you're not in a position of power when you're just about to go bankrupt.
Now, Bladuke says all of the political parties need to have more innovative and boisterous platforms, and he took aim at the Liberals' come home year pitch, saying it's neither. Now, while we're talking about the election, we saw our first poll of the campaign come out today from Mainstream Research, and it shows a big lead for the Liberals. They have 62% in the latest polling, just 26% for the PCs and 9% for the NDP. Meanwhile, the NL Alliance is polling at just a single point.
Welcome back. Well, after spending months urging Canadians to avoid international travel, today Justin Trudeau came out with concrete measures to discourage anyone still eyeing a sunny getaway. David Cochran reports.
For weeks, he's been warning Canadians not to travel because the rules could change with little notice. Turns out, he wasn't bluffing.
In the coming weeks, we will be introducing mandatory PCR testing at the airport for people returning to Canada.
A mandatory test on arrival, in addition to the pre-departure test required to fly home, followed by new quarantine measures that carry a big price tag.
Travelers will then have to wait for up to 3 days at an approved hotel for their test results at their own expense, which is expected to be more than $2,000.
It's a COVID all-inclusive, a bundle of inconvenience and deterrence stacked on top of existing restrictions designed to keep people home in the cold Canadian winter.
What we're trying very hard to do here is eliminate all discretionary, non-essential travel.
We urge you to cancel any plans to leave Canada in the near future, including for spring break.
It goes beyond urging. Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, Air Transat have all agreed to cancel flights to Mexico and the Caribbean from Sunday to April 30th, limiting vacations as COVID variants spread.
We know that just one case of the variant that comes in could cause significant challenges, and that's why we need to take extra measures.
As travel restrictions increase, vaccine supplies decrease yet again. Moderna warning Canada that next week's shipment will be down about 50,000 doses. Combined with the much larger Pfizer reductions, it leaves Canada short about 1 million doses by the middle of February. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson has released phase 3 clinical trial results for its coronavirus vaccine candidate. The company says it appears to be 66% effective overall. And unlike vaccines approved for use in Canada already, it requires just a single dose and only refrigeration for storage.
It's one thing to have an effective vaccine. It's another thing to actually get the doses, first arriving in Canada and then distributed across the various provinces and ultimately into people's arms. But at least a lot of the features of this vaccine should mean that once the vaccine gets here, it shouldn't be difficult to get out the door quickly and into the arms of people.
Now, the vaccine has yet to be approved for use anywhere. Johnson & Johnson says it will apply for authorization in the U.S. and other countries. The Canadian government has already signed an agreement for up to 38 million doses.
Now to a bit of a break from pandemic coverage. Call it a play-by-play gone astray. A Nova Scotia hockey mom decided to help keep parents up to date on the game this week. She thought she could rely on the voice assistant feature on her phone, but it turns out the app had its own ideas about what to say. Paul Palmander has the story.
Erin Bowes decided to try something a little different to give her fellow hockey parents updates on their team's game on Tuesday night. Because they couldn't live stream and no fans are allowed in the rink to watch games, she decided she would use her phone to try her own play-by-play from the BMO Center.
You can do it with the voiceover with Siri. You just hit the microphone and talk and she converts it into text. And I know she's not always perfect, but I wasn't thinking she would be quite as disastrous as she was.
Bowes was also operating the game clock as well as doing her new play-by-play by text role. These screen grabs show Siri and Bowes weren't exactly on the same page. At one point, the Cole Harbour team was taking the pup for a run instead of the puck, and the word puck turned into an F-bomb on multiple occasions. At one point in the game, Bowes posted an apology when she found out what Siri was up to.
I didn't realize all the conversion errors that Siri was making until after the fact, when I went around the ice and my safety rep was there, bent over, laughing her head off, telling me her husband had called because of my messages.
Most of the parents were in their cars in the parking lot, and the group chat play-by-play was highly entertaining.
My son's name is Sebi. That turned into Debbie and Sobies, and
Yeah, there, Cole Harbor turned into Pearl Harbor. It was just one thing after another. It was like the hits just kept on coming.
All this profanity, and you will take it as a humor. It's so fun. It's hilarious, and I never had that big laugh for like, oh, we need it in this pandemic, like to laugh like that.
The day after the game, HRM reversed its decision and is now allowing games to be live streamed. But Bose says she and Surrey will be ready if they're needed again. Paul Palmeter, CBC News, Bedford.
Let's take a look at some birthdays this week. Happy birthday to Grace Chafe of Goulds. She's turning 91. Birthday wishes going out to Doris Arnold House of Glovertown, now living in Peterborough, Ontario. She turns 99 today. Happy 94th birthday to Catherine Ronayne of Witless Bay. Birthday greetings going out to Rosanna Kindon of Point Leamington, now living in Mount Pearl. She turned 94 this week. Here's a big one. Olive Smith celebrated her 103rd birthday yesterday. She's from St. Anthony, now living in Stephenville Crossing.
Happy 94th birthday to Phyllis Bishop of Chamberlains. Sophie Party is celebrating her 92nd birthday. She's from Harbour Mill and now lives in Paradise. Happy 91st birthday to Raymond Foster of Burlington. Lily Tavner of Clarenville is celebrating her 98th birthday tomorrow. Bertha Mercer of Bay Roberts is celebrating a milestone. She turns 100 on Sunday. We're told she's a survivor of the 1929 tidal wave in Burin. Hope you have a great birthday.
Now let's take a look at some anniversaries. Happy 58th wedding anniversary to Max and Phyllis Beckett of Old Perlican, now living in St. John's. Happy 58th wedding anniversary also to Donald and Sandra Uden of St. John's. Wishing Max and Diane Kirby of Grand Falls, Windsor a happy 50th anniversary. Anniversary greetings going out to Dawn and Ida Warren of Chapel Arm, who are celebrating their 58th anniversary. Shirley and Dawn McNeil of St. John's are celebrating their 50th tomorrow.
Congratulations to David and Alice Boland of Manuals. They're celebrating their 53rd anniversary. Happy 56th anniversary to Jim and Marie Cotter of Melrose. Best wishes to Daphne and Abe Pittman of Deer Lake. They're celebrating 68 years of marriage. Happy 57th anniversary to Mac and Elizabeth Sutton of Lewisport. Happy 67th anniversary to Ernie and Ann Power from Point O'Mal on the Port-au-Port Peninsula.
Happy anniversary to Kay and Gerald Christopher of Summerside, who are celebrating their 60th anniversary. Congratulations to George and Linda Fleming. They're celebrating their 50th. Happy 55th wedding anniversary for Gerald and Helen Lewis of Conception Harbor. Happy 65th anniversary to Ronald and Agnes Keating of Long Harbor. Wishing Paul and Elizabeth McLean from Paradise a very happy 50th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations to Scott and Josephine Rowe of Seldom, Fogo Island, who are celebrating 52 years of marriage. Happy 50th anniversary to Marion and Jerry Guy of Mount Moriah, formerly of Corner Brook. Happy 52nd wedding anniversary to Harvey and Ella Luscombe from Birchie Bay. Happy 60th anniversary to Lawrence and Pearl Hilliard of St. John's Within. Wishing Max and Diane Kirby in Grand Falls, Windsor a happy 50th anniversary, and congratulations to Reg and Grace Reeder of Cox's Cove, who are celebrating their 61st anniversary. Another fine crowd. Congratulations once again.
And what a great way to start the weekend.
For sure. Happy Friday, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.